We had a great day yesterday when I had the honor of introducing my selection as running mate, the person who I believe will be the next and one of the greatest vice presidents in the history of the United States, Joe Biden. And we went back to the old state capitol in Springfield, Illinois, which some of you may know is where Abraham Lincoln served for years before he went to Washington. It's also the place where we kicked off this campaign 19 months ago. It was 7 degrees that day. It was cold. Yesterday it was 95 and it was hot. But 19 months had passed since we started this journey. And so naturally people ask me, you know, what have you learned about America during this time? And I tell them, well, first of all, I've learned how big and beautiful the land is in America. You know, when you travel through all 48 states in the continental United States, you get a sense of just the proportions of this country and, you know, the vast deserts and the you know, beautiful mountain peaks and the hidden treasures all around the country. And you realize how blessed we are. I mean, we've got one of the nicest pieces of real estate in the world. And it is a great blessing. Number two, you realize just how wonderful the American people are. Or it's reaffirmed. I mean, the American people are decent, they are generous, they are hardworking, they are self-reliant, they look after their families, they contribute to their communities. You know, they're just good people. And it gives you great confidence, and it makes you feel optimistic when you talk to people, partly because it turns out that for all the differences that you hear about on cable shows, for all the conflict that, you know, dominates the news, it turns out people have pretty common values. I mean, we have differences. Everybody's got different opinions about things, but basically people have some common values about family, about community, about honesty and hard work and the dignity of work, and about our obligations to our children and our grandchildren, to the future generations. And then the third thing that you learn is that the American people are anxious right now. Times are tough. Times are tough. I don't really need to tell you this because you're living it, but let me just go through a couple of statistics. We have seen the housing market collapse and have more home foreclosures than any time since the Great Depression. Even people who aren't losing their homes have seen their property values drop by 5, 10, in some areas 15, 20%. That's a loss of wealth for people. It's a loss of security. A lot of people were counting on that home equity for their retirements. We have not seen any increase in wages or incomes in a very long time on average. Here's a statistic for you. During Bill Clinton's presidency, the average family income went up $6,000. Under George Bush, it's gone down $1,000. That's a big swing. That means that that it's not just people's imaginations that they're feeling more pinched and that things don't, the budget doesn't balance at the end of the month. There's less money coming in. And unfortunately, there's more money going out because we're seeing inflation everywhere, but especially when it comes to gas prices and food prices, college and health care, things that aren't luxuries, but necessities for an awful lot of people. So you've got more money going out, less money coming in, and people for a while were using home equity loans to make ends meet, using credit cards, but as the financial market weakens, partly because nobody was minding the store and making sure that people weren't giving out predatory loans or loans that couldn't be paid back, credit is contracted, and so that's not an option for people. So they just cut back. And I meet people who don't mind cutting back for a little bit, but it becomes hard to cut back when you've got to drive 50 miles to your job and you don't really have an option. It becomes hard to cut back when you're already short when it comes to paying for home heating oil in the middle of winter. If you're on fixed incomes, if you're trying to go to school, it's hard. And that, I think, more than anything is driving this election. It's not just that things are hard for people short term, it's the gnawing suspicion that maybe if we don't do anything about how this economy works, that we may be passing on an America to the next generation that's a little poorer, a little meaner than the America we inherited from our parents and our grandparents. And that is un-American. There's something unacceptable about that. So, I don't accept that future for my children, and I don't accept it for yours. I don't accept it for America. And that's why I decided to run for President of the United States of America. That's why I intend to win this election. Now, this election's not going to be easy. It would be nice if, given how bad the economy is, how many people have lost jobs, how inflation's on the rise, how gas prices have skyrocketed, the huge mountain of debt that we've created for our children and our grandchildren. It'd nice be if people just kind of read the papers and said, well, that's it, throw the bums out. But it's going to be tougher than that. It's going to be tougher because, first of all, John McCain has a compelling biography. He has rendered brave and distinguished service to this country and deserves enormous respect for that. And so I have respect for John McCain's service. I don't have respect for his policies because they represent They represent 4 more years of the same. The same attitude and the same out-of-touch policies. And don't take my word for it. John McCain said that he thought we had made great progress economically under George Bush. That was what he said. I didn't say it. He said that he thought, this is just last week, he said that he thought the fundamentals of the economy were sound. He had one of his chief economic advisors, Phil Graham, said that the economy really wasn't that bad. People were just going through a mental recession. Man, I tell that to the guy whose plant's shut down and he's gotten a pink slip and he's lost his job and his health care, his pension, that you're just suffering a mental recession. Huh? Is it just mental? No. No, because when you get the pink slip and the factory closes, you actually have less money. Right, that's why you're not just imagining it. But what was worse, he then called us a nation of whiners. You remember that? Whiners. Yeah. So you just get a sense that these folks are out of touch. I mean, John McCain was asked at this Saddleback Forum, what's your definition of rich? He said, I don't know, $5 million. Which means if you're making 4, then, you're scrimping. You're having a tough time. You're middle class. If you only have 1 million, I don't know what, you qualify for food stamps. And then, as somebody already mentioned, he was asked the other day, how many homes do you have? And he said he didn't know. Did not know. And then, so they asked his staff, and they said, well, we think it's more than 4. And then we thought maybe it was 7. Then it was 8. We're still not clear. Now, I bring this up not because I think there's anything wrong with financial success. Great. We want wealth and and people to be rewarded for entrepreneurship and to be able to pass it down to their children. That's part of the American tradition. That's part of the American dream. But when you don't know how many homes you have, and you define being wealthy as having $5 million, then what that tells me is that you just don't get what's going on with people's everyday lives. The folks who are making $20,000 a year, or $40,000 a year, or $60,000 a year, that are trying to get their kid into college, or trying to pay their health care premiums at the end of every month. That's who I'm fighting for. That's what built America, that middle class. This election is about you. This election's about you, the teachers and the nurses and the cops and the firefighters, the farmers who are out there struggling. That's who this election should be about. It's about the small business person who's trying to get something going with a good idea, not a big corporation like ExxonMobil that's already making money. But unfortunately, John McCain's policies are borrowing a page from George Bush and Dick Cheney, essentially just more of the same. I mean, the essence of his economic policy is to continue the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans and then add an additional $300 billion in tax cuts for corporations, including companies that are shipping jobs overseas. And my attitude is, we may not be able to stop them from leaving, but we can stop incentivizing them. We will stop giving those tax breaks to companies that ship jobs overseas. We're going to give them to companies that are investing right here in Eau Claire. We're going to roll back some of these tax cuts for the wealthy, and we're going to give middle-class folks a tax cut. You're seeing ads probably. I don't know if they've gotten to Wisconsin yet, but you'll see them. It says, oh, Obama's going to raise your taxes. Will lead to economic disaster. Well, first of all, economic disaster is here. I don't have to lead you to anything. It showed up over the last 8 years. But the second thing is, here are the facts, and they're not disputed. Conservative think tanks have said the same thing, which is that I would provide a tax cut to 95% of Americans, and that means you. 95% of Americans would get a tax break under my plan, whereas John McCain leaves 100 million people out. I would give the middle class 3 times the amount of tax relief than John McCain's plan does. That's not disputed. That's a fact. It's in the New York Times Magazine today. There's a big article about my economic plans and compares it to John McCain's. This is not disputed. So you know who is fighting for you. It's not those guys who are going to be meeting in Minnesota. It's the folks who are meeting in Denver, and that's why we need your help. That's why we need your help in November. We need your help to make sure that every person in America can get health care. If you have health care, we're going to work to lower your premiums by $1,000, $2,000. If you are somebody who doesn't have health insurance, my attitude is you should be able to buy the same health insurance that Russ Feingold and I get as members of Congress. And if you can't afford it, we'll subsidize you. And we're going to emphasize prevention so that people aren't going to the emergency room and people have better quality. And we're not going to wait 20 years from now to do it or 10 years from now to do it. We're going to do it by the end of my first term as President of the United States of America. It's time to get this done. It's time to make our education system work for every child. Investing in early childhood education. Changing No Child Left Behind so teachers aren't teaching to the test. Recruiting more teachers, giving them higher salaries, giving them more support. Emphasizing math and science. and making college affordable for every young person in America who wants to go to a 2-year college or a 4-year college. In exchange for community service, we will pay their tuition. Nobody will be locked out of the American dream. It's time to reinvest in our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our levees. We can put people back to work right now. And it's time to invest in a clean energy future. One that recognizes we need increased domestic production, but that we can't drill our way out of this problem. We have 3% of the world's oil reserves, 25% of the world's oil. The math doesn't work. So we need to try everything. And I've said as part of a comprehensive package, I'm willing to consider offshore drilling. But that is not going to be the long-term solution. What we need to do is have a Manhattan Project, an Apollo project. Like going to the moon in 10 years, we need to cut our oil dependence by 20, 30%. Invest in solar and wind and biodiesel. Create the clean, efficient cars of the future made right here in the United States of America. Now, though, we can create 5 million new jobs in green energy. We can create another 2 million jobs in rebuilding our infrastructure. And these are jobs that can't be outsourced, jobs that pay well. And if people tell you that we can't afford it, you just remember that we are spending $10 to $12 billion a month in Iraq. If we can spend $10 to $12 billion a month in Iraq, we sure as hell can pay $10 to $12 million, $1 billion right here in the United States of America, put people back to work. I apologize, by the way. I usually say heck, especially after church, but that sort of slipped out. Sorry, kids. Yeah, well, right. What did Harry Truman say? He said, give him hell. And you know what Harry Truman said back? He said, I'm not going to give him hell. I'm going to tell the truth. They'll think it's hell. Which brings me to Iraq and foreign policy. You know, John McCain doesn't really have an economic plan. Everybody sort of knows it. I mean, it's basically just the same things we've been doing. His real claim to the presidency has to do with foreign policy. And his claim that he's ready and tested and I'm not. That's his basic argument. Now, let's examine the facts. John McCain was a cheerleader for the war in Iraq. Right after 9/11. Was ready to go right in. I think he was wrong. And I was right, and Russ Feingold was right, to say that this is a wrong approach, that we need to finish the job in Afghanistan, that we don't want to fan the flames of anti-American sentiment. I'm happy to compare his judgment to mine. I said over a year ago that Afghanistan was slipping behind, and it was time for us to start doing something about it. And John McCain finally caught up a few months ago and said he agreed with me. We need to finish the job in Afghanistan and get more troops there. But I'm happy to test my approach to Afghanistan to his, because I think he's been wrong and I've been right. He said we should muddle through. We can't muddle through. That's where Al-Qaeda is. That's where the people who killed 3,000 Americans are. We should have been there focused in the first place. So I'm happy to have that debate. Yeah, the truth is that the Republican track record on national security has not been particularly good. And the Democrats, I think, have better ideas. And I've got better ideas. But what I also recognize is that the American people want to feel safe and secure. And my job in this campaign is to explain that talking tough and acting dumb is not a way to keep you safe and secure. We need somebody who talks tough, who's going to act smart and be tough. That's how we're going to look after the safety of the American people, and that's one of the reasons I'm running for President of the United States of America. One last point on Iraq. Do you know that Iraq right now has a $79 billion surplus? You know that? So we've got a deficit. Iraq has a surplus. They don't know what to do with the money. They've put it in bank accounts in New York. They're drawing interest. While you, taxpayers, who are getting squeezed, you're sending money to Iraq to rebuild Iraq. That doesn't make any sense. And that's why that needs to end. We can put that money to work right here in Eau Claire, right here in Wisconsin, in ways that will help build a more secure economic future, which in turn will help us secure the country as a whole. So this is what's at stake. Now, let me just close by saying this. This is not going to be an easy election. We're going to have to work hard. And what the Republicans are going to do, because they know the issues aren't on their sides, they're going to do what they did 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago, 16 years ago, 20 years ago, which is to try to scare the heck out of you about the Democratic nominee. They're going to try to say, I saw some signs coming in, he's going to take away your guns. Even though I have repeatedly said I support strongly the Second Amendment and the legal right to bear arms. They'll say that he is going to tax you to death, even though, as I already mentioned, every study shows that my tax plan is better for you than John McCain's. And then there are going to be folks who are outside, not part of the McCain campaign, but part of that shadowy swift boat type. The same guy who wrote the Swift Boat book, he's now written a book about me. He says, oh, he's a Muslim, he's a leftist, he's scary. Look, this election's not about me. It's about you. I mean, we're going to be going into the convention this week, and if you're paying attention, you'll have a sense of who I am. My wife, Michelle, speaks tomorrow night, and you'll have a sense of who she is and what our values are and how we're raising our kids. And I think what you'll conclude is, gee, he's sort of like us. He comes from a middle-class background. He went to school on scholarships. He had to pay off student loans. He and his wife had to worry about child care. They had to figure out, how to start a college fund for their kids. You'll find out he's pretty much like us. But ultimately, this election's not about me. It's about you. And whether we are going to allow ourselves to watch this country get run into the ground, whether we are going to do the same old things over and over and over again and somehow expect a different result, or whether we are finally going to decide, not this time. Not this time. This time we're going to try something different. This time we're going to have the courage and the will to step up and start solving the big problems that this country faces. We are going to do what previous generations have done and made America worthy of the founders' dreams. That's what's at stake in this election. And if you are willing to work with me, Wisconsin's a big state. It's an important state. Eau Claire is a big, important state. If you are willing to work with me, then I promise you, we are not just going to win Wisconsin, but we are going to win this general election, and then you and I are going to change the country, change the world. Let's go get a bratwurst. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. God bless America.